You're listening to A Mighty Fortress, celebrating 500 years of Lutheranism.
A mighty fortress it is our God, a trusty shield and weapon.
Hello and welcome to A Mighty Fortress. I'm your host, Jake Zabel, the Knight of the Fortress, and you're listening to Australia's only confessional Lutheran podcast. Now, today's episode, I'm going to be doing a movie review. You know, I don't normally do movie reviews. It's not really something I do a lot on this show. I think the only one I've really done was when I did the review of the movie Risen. I think that was like episode 10 or 11, somewhere around there. Yeah, last time I did a movie review was for episode 10 on the movie Risen, about the resurrection of Jesus. And so I haven't really done any movie reviews, and we're already up into the 60s, time for our second movie review. But on today's episode, I want to be going through a collection of movie reviews on what I've called the Ultimate Review. And so for this, I want to be going through a trilogy known as the Ultimate Trilogy. This includes the movie called The Ultimate Gift, The Ultimate Life, and The Ultimate Legacy. For those who haven't seen them, spoilers alert, but I would recommend you go see all of them. So basically, I can give a breakdown of what the movies are. Then I want to kind of talk about the Christian aspect of them, and then also just about the quality of the movies.
Jason?
How do you know my name?
My business is to know everyone named in your grandfather's will.
I know what he left me. Nothing.
Walk away and you'll never know, will you?
Jason Stevens lives a life of wealth.
And how much is that? I want to tour that property as soon as possible.
A life of privilege.
Money has always been available to you like the air you breathe.
A life that's about to take
So what's in the box?
a turn.
Your inheritance.
I want to give you a series of gifts. Now, you fail in any way, you get nothing.
My grandfather may have left me something.
If you do succeed, you'll be one step closer to all I have for you.
It's only fair that I know the amount of money that we're dealing with here.
I violate their instructions. I am out.
I'm your son, Mom. Do manual labor for a month?
Granddad and I started out together at oil wells down in Louisiana. Made some money, we each bought cattle spreads. We've been on my property for the last 30 minutes or so.
You certainly could not have received the bulk of Red's estate.
It's between him and me.
It's our money!
Then just tell me what my total inheritance is. I'm over this.
Come back at the end of the month with one true friend.
Hey,
Now,
I need a friend.
Explain yourself.
It's complicated.
You have a bet with a dead guy? Cool.
an unlikely friendship
Are you Jason's friend?
We're like this.
and an unexpected romance
This is nice.
will open his eyes to what he's been missing all along.
So I have you by decree.
Knowing Emily by design. You okay, Jason? Don't tell me you've never been on a bus before. He's weird, isn't he?
He's a good weird.
I may have met someone.
And cherish her. And become the man she deserves.
Your worries, or whatever you want to call them, not life or death, Jason.
Two completely opposite people who wouldn't have had a chance without me.
What's your dream?
My dream was a perfect day. And I'm just finishing it.
The ultimate gift.
You got nothing else out of the deal but her. You'd still be a huge winner.
You don't begin to live until you've lost everything.
The Ultimate Gift follows a period of, I don't know, probably nearly a year or so of Jason Stevens, who, following the death of his grandfather, Red Stevens. Red Stevens was a man who made his money through oil, and he became a billionaire and had heaps of money. And Red Stevens became quite the philanthropist. He gave away lots of money. He started the Red Stevens Foundation and was giving away heaps of money. He's a very charitable person, and he was a very godly man. And then what happens is he dies. And see, Red had worked hard his whole life, whereas his kids had been raised with the money and were basically all spoilt brats. And so Red Stevens, he was a philanthropist, and yet his kids and grandkids were all greedy and selfish. And basically the movie starts off at Red's funeral, where they're all there just sitting around for the reading of the will to hear how much money they have. And you got his grandkids that actually in the scene are sitting there playing on like their iPods or phones or whatever, just going blah, 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 how much money do I get and stuff like that. And they really depicted that his family is just selfish and greedy. And then along comes Jason Stevens, who's his grandson. And Jason has also been very distant from his grandfather since Jason's father, Jay Stevens, was killed on an expedition while out with Red. And so he doesn't really have the best relationships with Red. And he comes to get his inheritance from the will. And Red actually says to him, now before you get your inheritance, I'm going to be giving you a series of gifts leading up to the ultimate gift. And therefore, throughout the movie, Jason has to do these gifts in order to get his ultimate gift, or his inheritance. And these gifts, as they call them, are like the challenges that in the end give him some kind of a reward that isn't necessarily a monetary reward. So, in other words, through the movie, he gets things like the gift of hard work, the gift of giving, the gift of love, the gift of friendship, the gift of gratitude, the gift of generosity, and so forth and so forth. Cool. So the 12 gifts presented in the movie are the gift of work, the gift of money, the gift of love, the gift of friends, the gift of laughter, the gift of giving, the gift of family, the gift of problems, the gift of learning, the gift of dreams, the gift of gratitude, and the gift of a day. Now, to go through those in more detail, the gift of work is just generally the gift of you have to learn to work with your hands and actually work hard in your life. This actually is shown off more in the second movie we're going to get to, called The Ultimate Life, where it explains that Red had to work hard his whole life to save up and get the money. He started from being a poor kid in the Depression to becoming a billionaire. And he had to work hard. Whereas Red's kids were lazy, spoiled, greedy brats that basically just wanted all their money and basically just worked through their lawyers to get their money. There's the gift. The gift of money comes next, and that's just understanding and learning how to handle money properly. There's gift of love, which is the gift of unconditional love. And see, this is interesting in the movie because Jason, at the start, he's this party boy and he has all these friends and all these people around, and then they take away his money. In order for him to learn the value of money, they actually take away his money. So as a sport rich kid, he has a trust fund and he's had his house and his cars and everything just given to him from his parents and grandparents. And so they take it all away and he has to basically just live off the streets for the time being. And there's a part where he's dating his then girlfriend, who's basically, she's a gold digger. She's been with him just for his money, and they go to a restaurant and he can't afford to pay the bill, and he asks if she'd be able to help out, and that's when she breaks up with him because he no longer has any money. And so this teaches him the value of unconditional love. There's the gift of friendships, where he has to find a true friend that'll be with him for him and not just because he's got money. And in this movie, Jason actually makes friends with this little girl that he meets while he's living in the park, and it's only later revealed in the film that, spoiler alert, she's got cancer and she's gonna die. And he ends up actually, the little girl, she gets Jason and her mum together throughout the film because the little girl's got leukemia and she's gonna die and she doesn't want her mum to be alone, so she tries to pair her mum up with Jason. And then there's the gift of laughter. That's, I think, pretty self-explanatory. That's just learning to enjoy life and to see the joys of life. There's the gift of giving, where he has to be generous, especially with things in money. In this movie, what they do is they give Jason, when he does the gift of work, he has to go and build a fence on a cattle ranch in the middle of Texas, and he actually gets a paycheck for about $1,500 for it. And for the gift of giving, he has to find somebody that he can give the money to. And so for the gift of giving, like I said, Jason meets this girl, Emily, who's got cancer, and her mother, Alexia, who he ends up dating and actually ends up marrying in the second film, but we'll get there, spoiler alert. And he uses his gift of generosity, and for the gift of giving, he gives his money to them to help pay their hospital bills. And there's the gift of family. That one actually nearly fails for Jason because he tries to have family Thanksgiving, but because his family are just all spoiled and greedy and money hungry, it basically just becomes into some big argument over money and inheritance and about Jason's gifts. And with his family actually saying, "You'll hear from my lawyer on Monday." So, yeah, that kind of really shows the kind of family they were in that film. There's the gift of problems, where he tries to teach him to have to, face and overcome problems in life. There's the gift of learning. This one is interesting. Jason actually has to go to Colombia, to where Red had a library that he'd built as donation to the Colombians down there. And it's during there that actually Jason knows that in Colombia is where his father died. And when Jason goes down to Colombia, he wants to actually find out the truth about his father's death. And he ends up getting captured by Colombian drug lords, and he manages to escape. Otherwise the movie would have ended with him getting shot, but he manages to escape from the drug lords. And there's the gift of dreams, which is an interesting one, because Jason doesn't actually... He ends up saying that he doesn't have a dream. His dream is basically to help others achieve their dream. And actually, they agree with him, and they say, "Yep, that sounds like a reasonable dream." And at that point, they give him about $100,000 or so for him to spend in any way that he feels fit. Jason actually doing the great thing in the film, he takes that money and he uses it to build Emily's home. A home dedicated to helping families that have children with cancer. There's the gift of gratitude, where he has to be thankful for what he has. And there's the gift of a day. And that one's actually quite an interesting one, because it's just basically, what would you do if you had your last day on Earth? What would be your perfect day? And this part is one of the most touching parts in the film, in my opinion, is where Emily says to him that she has one wish, and that she wants to go horse riding. And so Jason flies her out to Texas to take a horse riding on the cattle ranch that he worked at. And it's only while they're out there that Jason reveals to Alexia, Emily's mum, that he said, I brought her out here because Emily said her one wish was that she wanted to go horse riding. And that's when Alexia breaks down into tears and says, "Emily's afraid of horses. I've always the one that likes horse riding." And so Emily's last wish was that she could go riding with her mum one last time. And yeah, that part was quite touching. And then, spoiler alert, Emily dies later in the movie. And also, spoiler alert, Jason manages to pass all 12 of these gifts, and he ends up receiving an inheritance valued around $2 billion plus. And that's basically ultimate gift. And that movie came out in 2006, and then later in 2013 they brought out The Ultimate Life.
If you're standing here now, it means that not only have you succeeded in receiving all of my gifts, but have done so beyond the boundaries that I have set.
Wow.
Wow, yourself.
Have you told Mr. Billionaire Boyfriend about your Haiti plans?
There's this clinic in Haiti.
So sorry to interrupt.
Really sorry, Lex. I got it.
Whenever you have a sec.
She's gone, Hamilton.
I'm sure she didn't just decide to move on a whim.
Yeah, well, if you've not noticed, I've been a little busy at the foundation.
The 12 gifts that your grandfather taught you, any idea where they came from?
No.
Well, you're about to find out. He kept the journal from the time he was 15. Maybe you can find something from his past to help you here in the present.
September 3rd, 1941. Someday, I swear to heaven,
I'm gonna be a billionaire.
What are you doing?
Every day, I make a list of 10 things that I'm grateful to God for.
I'll be grateful someday.
You gotta be grateful for the little things in life. Otherwise, you'll never be grateful for nothing.
It's a good-looking post there, Slick. By the way, name's not Slick. It's Red. Gus Caldwell. Girls call me Stud. I'm gonna stick with Gus.
I want to know everything I can about how to be successful, just like you are.
Success takes a lot of things, son. A lot of things working together.
I'm not gonna let you do this.
How can I ever be worthy of getting my share if I'm not willing to go fight for it?
Hey, Slick, stay with me. Red, looks like this one's dry.
I don't want to hear that. Why ain't this ranch your selling? I want this land.
Not everything is about money, Red.
Everything is about money.
I traded everything that was important to me.
It's not too late, Red.
What if it is, Hamilton?
Your legacy is your family.
This is your moment. Your name in lights, you're gonna shine for the world tonight. For the world tonight.
And this movie's a bit interesting because it starts off with Jason and Alexia, where Jason tries to propose to Alexia, but it fails because he's busy, because what's happening is his family is suing him over his inheritance because they want all the inheritance that he received. Which, again, that's so greedy. And because he's been so distracted with both work and the lawsuits, he hasn't been paying the time to Alexia, the woman that he's wanting to propose to. And so Alexia has to run off because she wants to go do some humanitarian work in Haiti doing nursing. And then Jason's kind of, oh no, what I do, she's left me, how am I ever going to win her back? And Mr. Hamilton, the old lawyer, who is Red's friend, who was basically also Jason's mentor in the first film, and was the one who had to organise all the gifts, Mr. Hamilton gives Jason Red's journal. The second film, The Ultimate Life, is actually Jason just reads through Red's journal and they basically do a flashback to Red's life. And that's quite an interesting movie. Out of all three films, I actually like The Ultimate Life best. I think the storytelling, the characters, just excellent. And I really like the old setting during the Depression. I don't know, out of the three films, I just found The Ultimate Life to be the most interesting. Basically, the film is set as a flashback and it follows the life of Red, starting from a young teenager who had to drop out of school and get a job to feed his family, who then gets the idea that he wants to become a billionaire, and so he moves across into Texas. He comes from, like, I think New York or somewhere originally, and he catches a train, he basically as a hobo catches a train to Texas. And he decides to stay in Texas because he meets a girl and he goes to school and he decides that he wants to make money in oil. There's also a scene where it's during World War II and he has to go over and fight in the war. And basically he learns that in order to become a billionaire he needs to work hard and become a leader and not let other people boss him around. And he ends up getting oil. And he finally, after really hard work, years and years of working hard, he finally finds oil, gets his money and starts being rich. The problem is then, he basically just becomes so focused on money, because he still has this dream that he wants to be a billionaire. He wants to be a billionaire. That was the goal he'd set. He didn't want to just be rich, he had to be a billionaire. He had to make $1 billion. And so he's so just focused on getting this money, buying more oil rigs, buying more and more and more. And he basically just neglects his family. His kids are just spoiled brats that he basically just throws money at. He doesn't try hard at all to be a good father. He neglects his wife, he neglects his friends, and basically it all comes up to a pinnacle when he actually he buys a company and he actually becomes a billionaire, and he looks around and here he is, Christmas Day, the middle of nowhere, with no friends and no family around him, trapped at an airport. And then his friend Mr. Hamilton, the lawyer, he's in a car crash and loses both his kidneys, and that's when Red ends up giving him one of his kidneys. And it's now at this point that he realizes that he's achieved his dream of becoming a billionaire, but in order to get $1 billion, he had to sacrifice all his friends and his family. And so it's that point that he decides to then turn his life around and become a philanthropist and opens the Red Stevens Foundation and starts all this humanitarian work. And then at the end of the film, Jason learns from this book and says, I need to focus on my family more than my work. And he flies to Haiti and he proposes to Alexia and they get married and they do humanitarian work there in Haiti. And I loved both of those films. Those were excellent movies. I mean, Ultimate Gift was wonderful. Ultimate Life was even better. Ultimate Legacy sadly let me down.
Well, I'm afraid there's no delicate way to put this. I've come to make final arrangements. of Anderson House.
You ready?
I'd like it to go to my grandson, Joey.
Loring! You do know that Joey can't possibly manage Anderson House.
He is our only link to the family legacy. Besides, I'm afraid there is no time for debate.
Mr. Anderson, your grandmother has passed away. You needed at Anderson House.
Mr. Hamilton, I understand that my grandmother trusted the execution of the estate to your firm.
It's all yours.
You'll receive your inheritance if you meet all the stipulations in this contract.
She did this to force me back here. I mean, I've signed the contract. I'm here for the next year. But there's more to this, right?
The will details a series of steps you have to take.
Steps?
For work, money, friends, learning, problems, family, laughter, dreams, giving, gratitude, a day, and love.
If I complete this program before the year's up, can I leave early?
You'll never be able to get away from this place until you find the courage to deal with your demons.
That's a bullet hole. With that hole comes a lot of dark history and baggage.
You need to forgive your dad.
What kind of father does that? Well, I don't trust you. Hey. You got yours, I get that. I'm just trying to get mine.
Who else knows about this?
No one.
You know what this reminds me of, don't you?
Please don't.
And I'm going to explain in later why it let me down, but starts off actually very similar, and it's very confusing, the movie. It's really fast paced and a lot of characters thrown around. But basically the main character they want to focus on is a guy named Joey. And so in Ultimate Legacy, what happens is there's the Anderson House is the name of the place, and the old lady who'd started Anderson House has passed away. She wants to pass it on in her inheritance, but she wants to help out her grandson, Joey Anderson, who is the character that they follow most in this film. And Joey, as they reveal as the film goes on, Joey's mother died of cancer, and then Joey's father shot himself. And Joey just had a horrible life growing up, and he's really struggled. And so the film basically starts with Joey has to do the 12 gifts that Jason did. And so Jason comes back, and then they've also got these 2 extra new characters that they throw in. So they have Mr. Hamilton's granddaughter, where's her name? Angelica Hamilton, which doesn't really make much sense because in the other films they make a reference to the fact that Mr. Hamilton's wife died not long after marriage, which means they would have had to have a kid before they were married. And also the new assistant, instead of being Miss Hastings, the older lady, Angelica Hamilton's assistant is Kelly James, or Miss James as they call it throughout the movie, and she actually becomes the love interest of Joey Anderson. Now this film basically starts off with Joey's grandmother, the owner of Anderson House, dying. She wants Anderson House inheritance not to actually go to Joey. She says that her workers, Oscar and Horton, they can take care of the Anderson House for her, but she goes, and this is something that's very important to keep track of when the movie, because it gets very confusing, but she says, Anderson House doesn't need Joey, but Joey needs Anderson House. And so basically, Joey comes back to try and do these gifts in order to get his inheritance. But actually, the main twist of the film, and it's very confusing, the movie is very fast-paced and very all over the shop, and they don't explain it very well. Even at the end, they don't really explain the whole point of the movie. You have to really pay attention, but basically, Joey had a really hard time with his mother dying from cancer and his father shooting himself, and him basically just leaving Anderson House and never wanting to come back. And basically, the whole movie is not actually about Joey achieving the gifts. Like, Joey doesn't really need to... He's not as much of a spoiled brat as Jason was at the start of Ultimate Gift, and so Joey doesn't need to actually change so much and go through a journey. He doesn't need to learn about hard work. He doesn't need to learn about money or generosity, all that stuff. No, Joey needs to overcome his demons, as they say. He needs to learn forgiveness. He needs to learn to actually forgive and to move on from the past. See, Joey was scarred by the events of the death of both his parents, and he spent his whole life running. He doesn't want to go back to Anderson House. He just uses his money. He just keeps going on trips all around the world. And it's actually his grandma's will that forces him to come to Anderson, because as part of his inheritance, in order for him to receive his inheritance and to do his gifts, he has to come and actually stay at Anderson House for a whole 12 months, in which he has to achieve the 12 gifts. But actually the 12 gifts are actually just a ploy to get him to come to the house and to stay. And actually, as it reveals towards the end, some of the gifts have been deliberately set up to leave clues to Joey to try and force him to overcome his challenges. Like, he has to build a garden for his grandmother's grave. He has to build a garden as a memorial site there at Anderson House. And it also reveals that his father shot himself in the concert hall there on site. And one of his gifts, he actually, in order to achieve one of his gifts, he has to put on a benefit concert for military veterans and that in the hall. And so it forces him to have to go in that hall. And as he goes, that place for him used to be a place of sadness, but now thanks to this benefit concert it's become a place of joy. And there's a lot of challenges like that he goes through where he's achieving these 12 gifts, but it's not that he actually is trying to achieve the 12 gifts. The actual twist of the film is that they're trying to get him to learn forgiveness and to forgive his father and to move beyond the past and actually learn to face up to the problems that he's had, to overcome his struggles and actually come back to Anderson House. And that goes back to the beginning of the film where his grandmother says, Anderson House doesn't need Joey, Joey needs Anderson House. So you see where Red in Ultimate Gift was trying to change Jason and trying to help Jason improve his life so that he could pass on the Red Stevens Foundation to Jason, because he needed somebody that he could trust to look after that foundation. Mrs. Anderson doesn't need that. She said her workers, her employers, they'll be fine to take care of Anderson House. She can leave it in her will to them. But Joey needs Anderson House. She needs Joey to come back and live at Anderson House. She needs Joey to overcome his past. And that is actually the meaning of Ultimate Legacy, and it's very confusing. I'm going to go through two things here: the Christian themes in these films and the just overall how the films played out and how well they were as films. So firstly, it's Christian films. Now these films are kind of Christian and they've got Jesus in there. I mean, Ultimate Gift had the most reference to God. There's the chapel and they go and they pray at the cross and they talk about heaven and dying, and there's a lot of mention of God and heaven and stuff like that in Ultimate Gift. In Ultimate Life, God again kind of gets pushed to the background, and again in Ultimate Legacy, the only time they actually even mention God is they basically have a hymn at the funeral and they talk a little bit about God at the funeral, and when Mrs. Anderson, she's left a note to Joey, it just finishes with God bless, love, Grandma. There's not a lot of God mentioned in the second and third film. So as Christian films, there's not a lot of Jesus mentioned. And it's quite sad because in Ultimate Legacy, since the whole point of the film was about forgiveness and moving on from the past, you could have tied in a whole lot of stuff about Jesus and dying on the cross and the forgiveness of sins, and they really missed an opportunity to talk about Jesus there. See, a lot of the films don't really focus on Jesus so much. They focus a lot more on humanitarian work and just being very charitable and donating money and helping people. Yeah, apart from Ultimate Gift, there's not a whole lot of mention of Jesus in the other films, and a lot of them are just learning about hard work, changing your life, living a good moral life, giving money to people, being generous, being a good person. They're very secular humanitarianism. And so if you have atheist friends or agnostic friends or like Christian friends that, you know, aren't into a lot of Christian films, there's actually probably good films to just try and teach them a little bit about Jesus, but also just to teach them about, you know, humanitarian work. So I know that this is a theological podcast and I'm doing a movie review, and the idea would most likely be to do movie reviews and relate them to Christianity. But apart from the fact that these films just try to teach you to be a better person and to love your neighbour and care for people, there's not a lot of grace and forgiveness and Jesus and stuff like that. A lot of it's more like the law. A lot of it's humanitarian work. Like Jesus loving us and caring for us and welcoming us home and going to heaven and stuff like that in Ultimate Gift. But a lot of that just fell to the wayside in Ultimate Life and Ultimate Legacy. But as for the films themselves, well, the first two films I really liked. I really thought Ultimate Gift and Ultimate Life were excellent. Good storyline, good plot, good twists, good set of characters. They really had a lot of good character development. They really actually focused a lot in their characters, and they weren't very one-side characters. They actually had a lot of depth to them, like they were real people. And you could really connect with the characters when you watched Ultimate Gift and Ultimate Life. Not only could you connect with them, but you also kind of became emotionally attached to the characters. You could feel for the characters, and see, a good movie and a good writer can make you feel that way. They can make you actually... You feel joy when the character feels joy. You feel sadness when the character feels sadness. Like when Jason, when he falls in love with Alexi, you can feel that. And when Emily dies, it just cuts you to the core. And when there's that scene, like I said, that moving scene where Alexia reveals that actually Emily is afraid of horses, yet her final wish before she dies is to go horse riding with her mum. Oh, you can feel that when the mother breaks down for just basically tears of joy. It just cuts you straight to the heart. You can feel it. And so you feel really involved in these films. Ultimate Gift and Ultimate Life, you're attached. You're engrossed in the film. You're engaged. And the whole storyline is just very well done, and the character development is excellent. Ultimate Legacy wasn't. And see, to prove this fact, I've actually got the movie reviews and the scores given to them by the website Rotten Tomatoes, which give movie reviews. So Ultimate Gift, the first film, actually got an 84% review. Right, that's the rating it got. That's how popular Ultimate Gift was. Ultimate Life, the second film, only got a 56, which I feel is unfair, because I actually liked Ultimate Gift better than Ultimate Life. I really thought the storyline was great. I kind of liked the flashback. I think they could have spent a bit more time filling in some of the times instead of just doing so many time skips. But otherwise, apart from that, I mean, Ultimate Gift got 84. I would have at least given Ultimate Life a 90 or something. But then I'm not Rotten Tomatoes. They're free to make their own rating. Ultimate Legacy, though. Ultimate Gift, 84%. Ultimate Life, 56%. Ultimate Legacy, 29%. And I think that's justified, because I really liked Ultimate Gift, and I really loved Ultimate Life. I thought it was better than Ultimate Gift, and I was really hoping for Ultimate Legacy to be better than Ultimate Life. I was really hoping that it'd be an upwards slope of just getting better and better and better, and Ultimate Legacy was a complete flop. I mean, the film starts off by introducing a whole bunch of new characters. You introduce Joey's grandmother, the employees at Anderson House, Mr. Hamilton's granddaughter, the assistant at the law firm. You got all these new characters that just get introduced into the film, and the problem is they barely spend any time developing their character. They just skip, and a lot of these characters are very one-sided. Like, they don't have a lot of depth in their character. Gus, who was the old Texan guy, they bring him back and he just becomes like this stereotypical cowboy. This is stereotypical conservative Texan. They don't have a lot of depth into him like they did in the first two films. Like, actually, they really wrote Gus's character very well in Ultimate Gift and Ultimate Life. And basically he's just lost a lot of that in Ultimate Legacy, where he basically just becomes this just stereotypical cowboy. And Mr. Hamilton and Miss Hastings, who you've really had learnt to love in the first two films, just become background characters. Just forgotten about. These other new characters, you barely get time to get very well introduced to them. Also, Miss James, who ends up becoming the love interest to Joey, that there's no real romance there. With Jason and Alexia, they had their ups, their downs, they had their struggles, they had their love, they had their meeting, they had this growth of them coming together to actually fall in love with one another. Whereas Joey and Miss James kind of were just forced together because they needed to pair them up together for the sake of the story. Basically, they said, let's give Miss James a boyfriend, let's give Joey a girlfriend, bam, they're a couple. There was no chemistry, there was no growth, there was no ups and downs, there was no real romance to their relationship. They kind of just got thrown together for the sake of the story. And all the characters are very one-sided. These new ones they throw in, Horton, basically he's just thrown as like the kind of the guy that has no sense of humour. And Oscar is basically just the clumsy, I don't know, idiot who's kind of he's kind of a foot kisser. He kind of just is a people pleaser. And there's just no character development. There's just all these brand new characters thrown in, and they're all just shallow, one-sided stereotypes, and there's barely anything to them. And as for the story itself, it just jumps all over the place. You got the 12 gifts, and they just start jumping from gift to gift to gift, and there's no real development. There's a lot of montage scenes, you just skip things, there's time jumps here and there. And actually, most of the film, about 90% of the film takes place within 4 months. Like I said, Joey is actually there for 12 months. And so, he completes his gifts early on, and then they just basically just skip to the end of the year. They're just a massive big time jump. And the movie is just so fast paced. It's so hard to keep track of what's going on. First this is happening, and that's happening, and wait, what happened? I missed that. You just don't know what's going on in Ultimate Legacy. It's just confusing. And like I said, the actual plot of the film is not very well explained. And even at the end of the film, I had to rewatch it, and actually sit down and analyze it and think about what is happening before I figured out that the main message of the film was that the gifts aren't actually part of the film. That the gifts, Joey's not here to actually complete the gifts. Joey is here to forgive his father and overcome his struggles and to move on from the past, and so that he can actually learn to be happy again, and that he's not just living with these haunting memories of the death of his father and mother. And so that's actually the point of the film. It's about Joey moving on from his past, and that the gifts are actually just kind of a diversion to try and help him to come to that realization, to help him to learn to forgive his father and to move on. But you don't get that straight away. If you watch the movie through once, you won't figure that out. If you watch it through a second time and you actually study it and go, oh, now that makes sense, that's related to that and that's to that. It's just, it's not very easy to see, and it's not like at the end of the film it's like they explain it. See, in some films where they have like this hidden message and there's a big twist at the end and you're confused the whole way through, normally at the end of the film they will explain it. Like, you'll be confused through most of it, but when you get to the last scene of the film, they'll actually go back and they'll explain it. That's how a good movie works. Ultimate Legacy didn't do that. They basically just rushed it through. Joey ends up forgiving his father, then he just sells Anderson House to Horton, the employer, and everybody just moves on. Joey and Miss James are now dating. Joey kind of jokingly proposes, and she says, yeah, that's not the proper way to do it. Yeah, there's a couple steps you have to follow. And he says back, steps or gifts? And then that's basically end credits. That's the end of the film. So I recommend my listeners to actually go and watch these films. I do think they are good movies. I would recommend that you go and watch Ultimate Gift and Ultimate Life. If you haven't seen them, well, you've now listened to this show and spoiler alert, but you know it's going to happen. But basically, the main spoiler to take away from this is that if you go and watch them, in my opinion, Ultimate Life was better than Ultimate Gift. Ultimate Legacy was just a flop. They let the franchise down. Now, they go ahead and want to make a 4th film, I'm going to say go back to the Red Stevens and Jason Stevens story. That was a much better story. Forget about Joey Anderson. And also go back to what you did with Ultimate Gift. Not in the fact of just, rehashing the 12 gifts, but go back to the good storytelling, the good character development, that drawing you in, that makes you actually feel what the characters feel, the stuff that gets you involved in the film, engaged in the characters, kind of draw that makes you just engrossed in the storyline, and that you just become attached to the people in the film. I would definitely say that Ultimate Gift deserved that 84% rating. I would say that Ultimate Life deserves probably a 92% rating, and I think Ultimate Legacy definitely doesn't deserve anything higher than 30%. So that's my opinion, but that's also how I'm the one doing the review, so this is my opinion on what I thought of the films. So thanks for listening to this episode of A Mighty Fortress. If you join me again next episode, I'll be doing a theological topic. I'm wanting to do some more in my False Gospels series that I did, where I did the False Gospel of Tolerance. I'm wanting to do a few extra in that series. Since I've now started that, I've got some ideas for what I want to do. So if you join me again for our next episode of A Mighty Fortress, I'll be back to a theological topic, more Bible verses, more Lutheran confessions, all that stuff. And I don't know when I'll do another movie review again. I only just wanted to do this one because I'd recently just watched all 3 films. They were fresh in my mind, and I just needed something to do for this week's episode. So, thanks for listening for this edition of A Mighty Fortress. I've been your host, Jake Zabel. Goodbye and God bless. Thank you for listening to A Mighty Fortress. A Mighty Fortress is an Australian confessional Lutheran podcast produced by the Order of Knight George. The Order of Knight George is a non-synodical and intersynodical collective of Australian confessional Lutherans, and our website is dedicated to being a hub of Australian confessional Lutheran resources. The latest episodes of A Mighty Fortress can be found on either SoundCloud or iTunes. Previous episodes of Mighty Fortress can be found on the Order of Knight George website, www.clam.info. That is www.clam.info. All visual content produced by the Order of Knight George can be found on our YouTube channel under the title Knight Jake. If you wish to comment on the show, ask any questions, or you just wish to communicate with the Order of Knight George, you can email us at amightyfortresspodcast@yahoo.com.au. Thanks for listening, and remember that in all circumstances, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one.